What's going on, Washington Commanders Nation? It is the final day of the month of January, the first month of the rest of our lives as Commanders fans in our first year truly post Dan Snyder, the first real fingerprint building season of the Josh Harris ownership group here in DC. And Washington still sits without a head coach. We did land the biggest fish when it came to general manager, and we were the most proactive and quickest on the market in the head coaching searching industry. But we're now the only team in the league without a head coach. We're the only guy without a signal caller as we speak going into February. We're about 11 days out from the Super Bowl, and Washington currently is in shambles. Ben Johnson royally fucked our head coaching prospects, and we are trying to put the pieces back together to find the right guy here in DC. If there's one thing that's clear about our process, is we had all our eggs in the Ben Johnson basket, and we were not prepared for him to get cold feet at the altar and say, nah, I'm going to stay in Detroit, while we were wheels up, jet in the air on the way to Detroit, Motown City. He said, nah, I'm good. I'm going to go back. So we found out that Ben Johnson is comfortable where he sits. He may be a beta male. He may not be an alpha. He may not be ready for the bright lights yet. I ain't mad at him, but I think this makes me look at our process a little bit differently, because it makes it look like we did not have a backup option. We now sit here on January 31st with our pants at our ankles, with our hands on our hips, and we're like, what the actual fuck are we doing? Or at least that's what it appears on the outside. Is it possible that Ben Johnson was not as heralded or seen with reverence in the building, and they're waiting on a guy maybe in Kansas City or San Francisco? It's possible. Do they suddenly have an interest in bringing in a guy like Mike Vrabel? Possibly. But as we currently sit here on January 31st, the favorite to get the Washington job is Dallas defensive coordinator Dan Quinn, former head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. Out of the 8 names we interviewed, the list has now been dwindled down to Dan Quinn, Ravens defensive line coach Anthony Weaver, Detroit Lions defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn, and Washington's junior mint milk dud head ass offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy. That's the list right now. That's the list. If we hire Weaver, EB, or Glenn, that would, I believe, be the first African-American head coach in the history of the Washington franchise. I know Marvin Lewis and Terry Robisky served as interim options here, but they would be the first full-time black coaches, which is cool, and I never want to see a brother fail. But if we keeping it a whole buck, I'm not, as a fan, playing the diversity Olympics. Just hire the right guy. I don't care what gender, color. I don't care what they look like, what they are, what their makeup is from an ethnic background stance. Just be good. I just want this team to be fucking good again. Everybody got to see glory days here in DC, not us 32-year-old and younger fans. I just want us to get the right guy. And I think based on the remaining crop of guys, I'd take a swing on the Aaron Glenn or Anthony Weavers before I would go the Dan Quinn route. And here's my explanation for such. Dan Quinn feels as Ronald Eugene Rivera as a hire that these niggas could make. It feels like someone even made a picture yesterday where they blended Ron Rivera's face with Dan Quinn's and put the cap on backwards, because it feels so Ron-like. The sales pitch is the exact same. It's the same elevator pitch. He's been to a Super Bowl. He almost won the Super Bowl. He had a couple of good years, but then he didn't. And then when he lost his offensive coordinator, shit went to hell. It went to hell there in Atlanta. And then it was 7-9, 7-9, 0-5, fired. How about taking a chance on someone who's not yet been given the chance to fail? I want to give someone their first opportunity. I want to hire someone that I've never seen the words fired next to their name in graphic in the National Football League. Everybody speaks to how well of a culture and leader Dan Quinn was. He was so phenomenal a leader that he was fired. We out here listening to cosign from players like Tyler Columbus. Do y'all remember when Tyler Columbus played here? He was a fucking turnstile. Why do I care what Tyler Columbus has to say about Dan Quinn's leadership? Who we going to ask next? Ja Rule? Why are we taking opinions and cosigns from people that aren't good at what they do? We're just, oh my God, but players love all kinds of shit. Liking somebody does not make them a great leader. The culture he built in Atlanta. What did that culture win? 6 seasons as a head coach. He had 2 good seasons there. They went to 2 trips to the NFC Championship, 1 trip to the Super Bowl, gave up a 28-3 lead, and then he managed to go to hell after Kyle Shanahan took the San Francisco job. That is, I'm sorry, I'm going to make Dan Quinn and Ron Rivera synonymous with each other because I don't see the difference. He's younger than Ron. That's the difference. And he's more schematically sound. His defense has succeeded in every stop he's went to. Atlanta's did regress over the years, but his defense was phenomenal as he crafted the Legion of Boom and changed philosophies in Seattle, Atlanta. Every place he's went, he's changed his philosophy. He has 2 Defensive Player of the Year candidates in Dallas this year. He's changed his coverage. He's changed his alignments and the crux of his scheme at each stop he's went. So he's shown that he is innovative. He does change his style to fit with whatever the modern trends of the league are. But Anthony Weaver, Aaron Glenn, I'd rather give one of them a shot. Give them their first crack at it. I've never seen them fail. I've seen Dan Quinn fail, and that's going to be the difference for me. After Ben Johnson, the next highest candidate on the list was Mike Macdonald. He's right up the road in Baltimore. 36-year-old defensive mastermind. He's the defensive equivalent to what Ben Johnson is. They call him Defensive McVay. We interviewed him Monday. Got beat to the punch by the Seahawks. Now he becomes the youngest head coach in the league of the Seattle Seahawks. So fucking great. We even had an end. Mike Macdonald's wife is from the DMV. She was a Redskinette. She was a cheerleader for the Washington Redskins. Seattle came in and said, we're going young. Everybody had Dan Quinn as a shoe-in for the Seattle job. He literally built the best defense in Seattle Seahawks franchise history, and they didn't want this nigga. They didn't want him. He's 7 teams passed on Dan Quinn this hiring cycle, and that's who we marrying and we hitching our wagon to. It just feels like we're backing into the coach hire at this point. It feels like the guys we wanted, it didn't work out. There was no legit backup plan, so we're just going to say, pick the next best interview. Who dazzled the room? Maybe Anthony Weaver turns out to be a John Harbaugh, Mike Tomlin type mainstay. Because when those guys got job, the league and fans were looking around like, who the fuck is this guy? And they're the longest tenured coaches in the league at this point. 16 years plus of history, culture shifting, and you don't see those guys have bad seasons. They're on 2 marquee franchises. I want to be a marquee franchise again. This hire is so important. Then there's the Dolphins search for a couple of years ago. They missed out on their top targets and ended up circling back on Mike McDaniel, the charismatic, young, hilarious offensive guru that comes from the Shanahan coaching tree. So you don't necessarily win when you get the hottest guy on the market. And you're not necessarily going to fail because you got the last of the slim pickings, the last of the Mohicans, the scraps that were left from the other coaching vacancies. But the process does look a little meh in the light at this point. And it doesn't look as confident and thorough and rapid as it seemed it was on track to be during the beginning of the process. So where does Washington go next? Adam Peters is keeping Martin Mayhew, Eric Stokes, and company on staff. Their titles are going to change. We're going to find that out soon. But they're headed up to Mobile. What that tells me is one of two things. They already know who the head coach is going to be, waiting for the announcement, or they're waiting for the Super Bowl to be played because they could be waiting for a Steve Wilkes, a Clint Kubiak, a Brian Greasy off the San Francisco 49ers coaching pool, because our GM did build that. He has a ring on the line in next week's Super Bowl. He could be waiting for one of his guys to pair with to align his vision with someone he worked with in San Francisco. You never know. They could be waiting to interview Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator of the Kansas City Chiefs. They could be waiting for Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel been out there. Nobody really wants him, but that's a top 10 coach in the league. And for whatever reason, he's under 50. Nobody wants him. I believe he's only interviewed with Atlanta and Seattle. He didn't get those jobs. It's a very interesting, a very odd coaching cycle. The only thing I can put concrete evidence to about Washington's coaching process is that we had all our eggs in the Ben Johnson basket, and he hopped them motherfuckers right back to 8 Mile like B Rabbit and stayed in Detroit. Best of luck to your endeavors elsewhere, but I'm not going to lie, I was sick yesterday. I was like, I hope Ben Johnson gets a splinter, stumps his toe, and I hope his check engine light turns on this car today. I was feeling real petulant when I read that news because you didn't even let us touch down to Detroit. It feels like beta male energy, like he may not have been able to tell them no if they arrive, so let me pull out and hedge my bet now, because if they come here, they're probably going to get me. Sounds kind of pussy, to be honest, but hey, to each their own. If you don't feel like you're ready, call plays for Detroit. Best of wishes. I don't know if y'all going to get back, but I don't care anymore. I think at this point on January 31st at 4 p.m., the only hire that would truly repulse me is Eric Bieniemy. That's the only hire that would make me feel like, oh, they really ran out of options. Straight out of options, literally, if that's the way that we go. But as a fan who knows I'm going to be there when the season starts in September, who knows I'm going to be there in my clown suit, in my burgundy and gold colors, with my burgundy tinted lenses, no matter who they hire, let's just get it done. We're at day 3 of the Senior Bowl. The Super Bowl's next week, and we've had a job vacancy here for a month now. Hire a fucking coach. Stand on your conviction. Try to convince fans that this was your guy all along, and don't make them look like a second fiddle consolation prize, even though it looks like that's the case in 4K. But let's get a coach hired, whether it's Dan Quinn, Anthony Weaver, Aaron Glenn, or whether we open up the process to add more people. Let's get this shit done. Let's get a staff, and let's start scouting quarterbacks, because our next biggest decision is who's going to be the franchise signal caller from the quarterback position. And let's get a good staff in here, and let's build. Adam Peters, Josh Harris, it's y'all world. I will give y'all the benefit of the doubt, even though it looks real irky in the light right now. If it's Dan Quinn, fuck it, let's roll. If it's Anthony Weaver, let's roll, and let's hope for the best. I would prefer it not be a retread, but is what it is. Beggars can't be choosers. Just sell me the vision, and sell me how this aligned vision illustrates potential and substantial success for the Washington Commanders going forward in 2024 and beyond. That's all I have to say on the matter for right now. Hopefully we get an update in the next 24 to 48 hours so we can talk about how this staff's going to be built, and we can move forward to free agency acquisitions and draft talk now that we will know what the schematics will be once our coaching staff is in place. That's all I got for right now. Hail to the Washington Commanders. Try to remain as positive as possible, but air your grievances always. Deuce.